Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ataraxis Station, and we are here with two of my favorite people on the internet at Good Gaming with Bad People, CJ and Rob. Today, we are going to be talking all about Resident Evil Village. Y'all, thank you so much for doing this with me. I am super excited.
Thanks for having us.
I'm looking forward to it.
So we finally got our hands on the game and have all beaten it. Right off the top, I would love to know your overall thoughts. Like, just if you could just sum it up, like, what'd y'all think? Above expectations, below expectations? How was it?
For me, definitely above expectations. I think when we talked last time, I was like, I'm interested, but also concerned, because as I voiced before, 7 was not my favorite of the games. 8 for me was like, it hit the perfect balance of what I was looking for. I loved it.
Awesome.
For me, yeah, definitely. I would say like a bit above expectations. Like it honestly didn't blow me away, but it's probably my favorite one. And there are just because there are a few issues in it that I'm sure we'll talk about later that if they would have nailed perfectly, like this would be hands down like the best survival horror game I've ever played. Possibly like in my top 10, just games in general. But very excellent and very worth your time.
I completely agree. I enjoyed the absolute heck out of this game. I beat it 6 times already.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going for that platinum, but I can't get the mercenaries mode one yet because it's frustrating. But yeah, it's I as well, you know, had my concerns in it. I was definitely, I think, a little bit more optimistic than most, but I will have to say right off the bat, I had a great time, and I'm still, the weird thing is I'm still having a good time. You know, like I'm still going through the game a couple more. But yeah, today I figured we should just go through the game and talk about each part individually and kind of see, you know, where we were all at, just because thankfully the game's not, it has very set pieces, so I feel like we could talk about every single one of those, and I'm very excited about this. But I will say right off the bat, I do want to jump into it. How fun was it for shit to hit the fan just immediately?
Yeah, I mean it with the like Mia start.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good hook. It I mean, we'll talk more about it in story later, but like as a hook to get you into the game, it definitely gets you intrigued.
Yeah, I really liked having Ethan have just a nice, like, chill 5 minutes for once. But that's really all it was. But I will say right off the bat, it was cool because did you guys find any of the Easter eggs?
Like the books. Yeah, how like one was written by, I know one was written by a Kendo. I don't think it's the Kendo from 2 and 3.
It's his brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then one of the other books, I believe, is written by Spencer, the guy who built the mansion.
Yeah, and it was all about European architecture.
I remember seeing that in a Reddit post, and I was like, that's cool, and explains why he built such a goof-ass mansion for all these zombies to live in.
Right? But yeah, it was, I thought, like, I don't know, at first, you know, I was a little curious, but I will say, I know, Rob, you mentioned you wanted to talk a little bit, too, about the animatic in the beginning. For me, like, I will admit, when I started playing the game, it kind of threw me for a loop. I got some serious Deathly Hallows vibes, which I think is a good thing because the animation was really cool. But yeah, why don't you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it's probably something we can loop back to a bit at the end too, because like, what really intrigued me about it is, like, it very heavily implied like a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it implied there was some sort of thematic content to the game to me, where like if you're having a storybook thing at the start, you're like, oh, there's a moral or something in this that's going to be played out through the game. And I was like, that's really interesting that Resident Evil is gonna like I don't associate those games with, hey, we're gonna try and do something that makes you, you know, like think when the game is done. So that also was like another thing that really intrigued me with the game. And I mean, I think like in as far as talking about whether they fully stick the landing on that, that'll be maybe a conversation to get into at the end. But like certainly as a starting point, it's a really interesting choice for them to have made.
Mm-hmm. I do agree with Ethan's summation though at the beginning there, where it's like that's not really a story for a baby. Like, thankfully, Rose can't really understand it, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I mean, we find out later I was wrong to hold that against Mia, but
yeah,
I was like, fucking Mia, she's the worst. I told you guys.
yeah, she definitely like, once again, we'll touch on it more, but at the beginning, it's like, oh, Mia has some PTSD going on here. Like, she's
Yeah.
snapping at him all the time. Yeah, there was just something off, but at the same time, like in my head, I'm like, man, she's seen some shit. Like, I can't really hold it against her, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, we arrive quite suddenly at Ethan being rightfully paranoid, uh, as Mia gets marked through the window by none other than our favorite big boulder punching bro, Chris Redfield. I love his model in this game. That was the first thing right off the bat that I noticed, is that they like properly aged him up. They dyed his hair back from his model in 7, which was just kind of weird. But like as soon as I saw him and like he looked like Chris, except however many years older. And I think that's the moment that like sold me on being like, okay, we're going for this ride, and I'm ready to follow this story.
I don't think for me I was quite there yet, because as we'll see going in the ending, like turns out Chris isn't evil. Like the game did not convince me at the start that this was some big heel turn and that like my wife had just been killed, so I didn't have all of that like emotional weight going into actually like the village. I was more just like, all right, what's going on? I was more kind of interested rather than, oh man, I can't believe my wife's dead and Chris is evil now. But that's just me being a big jaded gamer.
I was willing to buy that it was really Mia who was dead. I figured he had to have some reason, and I was very interested in like what that reason was. But yeah, I didn't think he was evil immediately. We'll talk about whether he was smart later on. But...
Yeah, I don't think I thought he was evil, but I think the nostalgia drop there hit me hard enough that I was like, all right, I'm ready to roll through this. But due to a series of very, very bad at their job subordinates, we end up in the starting piece, which is the village. I got the craziest Resident Evil 4 vibes from this. I didn't even think I would get it as much as I did. But I liked the village a lot. I did think it was kind of maybe not drawn out, but I liked how it served as a hub, and I liked kind of the beginning story of introducing you to these characters who are like lost in the past, even though clearly we're in the future. I loved all the characters, but I think the design of the village itself was like map-wise for me just kind of like lost me, because I spent like 2 hours trying to get through a red gate that you couldn't do until after like the third boss. But
I think I know exactly what gate you're talking.
Yeah. But off the bat, I thought it confused me a lot at first. Like not understanding what was going on. So like I kind of pulled back a little bit from the story. What were your all thoughts about when you first enter the village and start to get to that first point where you meet the villagers?
I was hopeful and excited, because what I was really hoping it would be, which spoilers it ended up not being, was a place where people would still be like through the whole game. Like you would kind of get to see their way of life, rather than like in 4, everything terrible has already happened and now these aren't even people anymore. So I was hoping like maybe you would have more people like Duke who are just kind of around and you could like talk to them between missions and get to see. I didn't expect the whole like the village itself to be like a big gameplay area full of monsters. I figured the village was almost going to kind of be like your safety hub that you would then branch out to the 4 different zones to go fight the lords. So I was a little disappointed as the game went on when I was like, oh, everyone is dead now, so it's just me and Duke. But it's something I'd like to see expanded on, honestly, rather than just pulled away from the next game.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like that first introduction to the village, especially that kind of the moment where it introduces you to that idea of like pushing the shelf in front of the door, and you're kind of like, oh, I've got to hold down here for a minute. Felt really intense. And I kind of wish it had kept that up, because I was like, oh, this is going to be a mechanic through the game, is like, I'm going to have to be blocking doors and playing smart, you know?
Right.
But like after that kind of, after the moment where the lycanthrope rides up on a horse and then you never see one on a horse again for the rest of the game, the like village becomes kind of more like the rest of the levels, where just like monsters will spawn in places as the story goes on, but like once you clear them out, they're gone. I still thought it was really cool. I really enjoyed exploring the village. I really like in, this is not a Metroidvania game, but in Metroidvania games where you like go back to places you've been before because you remember there was a thing there and you got a new tool, and it has that thing in it, which I liked a lot. I definitely agree with CJ though. Like I would have really liked to have had some villagers in it, to you know, like get some of the feel for what that village was like, or even just, you know, like these villagers have been worshiping Mother Miranda and now everything's gone to hell, and it would be cool to get the perspective of like the people who have been there, and you get that just a teensy bit at the start, and then they're all dead.
Yeah, it's I did like that though, where it gives you the feeling of, wow, I've really stumbled just straight into a cult.
Yeah.
But it's like none of the villagers I ever felt were like bad people. You know, it just seemed like they were set in their ways and they didn't know anything outside of this area. But I agree, I would have liked to see that explored a little bit more. Like, it was a place where they like had technology, but not really. And that's interesting to me, you know? And I also like, I wanted to know if they'd aged like really, like they had longer lives than like the outside world, or kind of what was going on there. I don't know. It just seemed, like I said, it seemed like a village stuck in time, but you know, clearly it's modern day. So feels like there was definitely missing some elements that I am curious about. But the house scene was really cool for me, to kind of set up the, I don't know, the stakes, I guess, because for me, the thing that I took away from it most is that, you know, they're talking about Mother Miranda, you know, protects us, etc. And then by the end of that, you realize whatever this is does not give a fuck about any of these people. And it definitely kind of puts you in the okay, well, it's definitely me against everything here, and everything is now trying to kill me, except for Duke. Duke's our man.
I really hope he shows up in another game.
I loved the Easter egg with him with the what are you buying?
Yeah.
A friend of mine used to say that.
Yeah, like he has replaced the merchant for me from 4, like as the character I want to sell me stuff forever.
Yeah. At first I wasn't sure about him, but like by the time you run into him in the castle and he's just kind of being a straight up bro, it's like, okay, we're cool. Like
well, it's cool the way he like really becomes a character in a way that the merchant from 4 didn't. And that like clearly there's something more going on with him than he lets on, which is really intriguing.
Yeah, he's a fully realized character in himself, which is pretty impressive if you consider, you know, he's really only in the game like a handful of times, you know, but like by the end it's like, oh shit, no, he's got his own kind of motivation, and I'm not sure what it is, but he's helping me, so I'm gonna go with it.
Yep.
But yeah, so the environment switch from the original village area to the castle, in my opinion, this is my favorite like A to B in the game. I absolutely love the castle. I love the environment. I love all of the characters who come with the castle. And I don't know, like I explored that area for hours, just even after like being to the point where it's like, okay, like now I know I could continue this story. I mean, I went through every single nook and cranny. I loved the design. I loved, yeah, that the whole area. I could go into so much further detail, but when you first jump into it, it gave me Resident Evil 1 vibes for the first time in a very, very long time. I got that nostalgic feel. I don't know if you guys felt the same way at all.
Yeah, like coming into I think it's the music halls. It's the one with the staircase that goes up. It's like the second room in. That felt so much like the entrance to the Spencer Mansion.
For
I was
sure.
like, oh, this is really cool. I wish I would have had more time to be able to do stuff before they're like, surprise, bug women. And then I was like, oh, this is a game. I have to run.
Here we go.
Yeah, for sure. This game really felt like it just was pulling a lot of really good parts from a bunch of different Resident Evils.
Yeah. And yeah, the castle to me is like the strongest part of the game, which is a little unfortunate that it comes like right at the start.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the design of it is so great. Dimitrescu, I think, is at least like design-wise the most interesting of the enemies or the lords, even if she maybe stole a little bit of her style from my favorite supernatural witch who steps on people.
That's fair. That's fair. I didn't see that. That's great.
Oh, see if I can turn my camera back on now. There we go.
Like really hoping that the castle kind of was going to be the Spencer Mansion. Where like that's where you were for the majority of the game, and then maybe eventually you'd find your way to like a lab or some like auxiliary building. But like the castle was going to be a thing you were constantly opening new doorways and like Dark Souls shortcutting it on itself.
Yeah.
So I was definitely very disappointed when like you deal with the main threat of the castle and then everything's blown up. They're like, well, time to go over here now. I was like, oh.
Gotta put my saving the world boots on. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I will say one thing I will say, and I think this would be a good point for my perspective of the game, is that I actually felt that every single environment stayed its welcome. I know a lot of people felt that they wished that the castle was the full game, and it was, you know, once again, built on top of each other, you know, and I think they could have very easily done that with the environments that they had. You know, like they could have had the second lord be the guest house, right? They could have had Heisenberg be the lab right underneath, kind of like they did in the first one. But I don't know. I really thought, especially in the castle, I loved that it was its own set piece. And I love that about every single one of the environments, because every single lord was so different and so unique. And there were definitely some that I liked more than the others, and I was totally fine with spending less time with some, like Moreau. Wasn't a fan of Moreau. I liked his character, but I didn't like his, I don't know, maybe motivation.
Zone is like the low point of the game for me.
Yeah. And that one seemed to go by pretty quick. And I was totally okay with that. And it's like, all right, you know, moving on. But for me, the castle definitely seemed like the longest set piece. Maybe the factory, but I found that you can go through the factory pretty quick. But yeah, like, and also I think that Lady D for me is the best of the villains. For a myriad of reasons. Like she has her own intentions, just because she's somebody who wants to take care of her family, and that's what comes first, even before Mother Miranda, who you find bits and pieces all throughout the game about all these things that Mother Miranda did for her, about how she had like a rare blood disease that was killing her, and Mother Miranda kind of saved her and helped her create this family. But in the end, like, she doesn't really care so much. Like, you know, she puts on face where she tries to, you know, do her thing, but at the end of the day, all she cares about is her daughters, and if you're getting in the way, you're going down. She was just such a strong character to me, that it was a bummer when we had to put her down.
Yeah. Well, and she's like, I think I agree that I think of the Lords, she's the one who they make the most interesting. But I also wish that we kind of got more of like her story, because like one thing, she like clearly has some gender issues going on in terms of like that seems like there's some hatred of men, and then like the way that she's treating women, even, you know, like she's draining their blood to make the special wine, and then the desiccated leftover corpses become those like ghouls that you're running
Mhm.
into below the castle. And like I think a little bit of backstory to like what's going on with her psychologically and to like behave the way that she does would be
Yeah.
really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
things like that. But yeah, I mean, like the backstory that you find going through the castle about her, where you are learning about like the wine that she's been making out of people and just like the servants, you know, who were working there but are terrified of like getting dragged down to the
Mhm.
basement is all
Because they
really
know you can't go
interesting.
back.
Yeah.
For me,
And then you get down, yeah.
the one
Yeah.
was when you find the pages about her daughters, and like, oh yeah,
Mhm.
there was this bug and now they're people. Like it was I mean, it was, you know, much better explained than that, but
Mhm.
it's very interesting because, you know, she even goes into detail in those notes where it's like, oh, they became sentient and they started calling me, you know, mom, and like, I don't know, it was really strange and I liked it a lot. And
Yeah.
even that but yeah, I loved how even the ghouls and stuff had their own backstory, and it's like they're totally different than these lichens. You know, these are a completely different set of circumstances and experiment. And I think that was another strong part about the game, is that there are very, very specific people doing very fucked up things to a myriad of different people in this game, and it was we got a lot of story for all of them, which
Mhm.
I found really cool. What were your thoughts on the daughters as far as like enemies?
Uh, kind of just disappointing in general. They were all basically the same character, and their
Mhm.
fights were just kind of very quick. And like the one for me that stands out as like being the dumbest is the one that who attacks you in that like observatory room where there's the switch you can
Yeah.
pull to let the cold in. Like I accidentally, like, because I kind of forgot, like when I was playing my Village of Shadows playthrough,
Hmm.
I didn't realize I was going into that room, and I had like 4 bullets and a knife. And as soon as it started, I was like, I'm gonna die. And then it just turned into me just standing by a switch and repeatedly flipping it until she'd get mad, and then I'd run over and poke her a few times. And I was just like, oh, this feels almost mindless.
Mhm.
I was definitely shocked at how easy those fights were.
Yeah, like they just felt like they came like one after the other. Like the castle to me, like
Mhm.
playing through my second time, felt so
Goes,
short.
Hmm.
yeah, it goes really fast the second time you go through it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like, but aside from their fights, like none of the people really of Castle Dimitrescu felt like a good replacement for Mr. X
Hmm.
or even Nemesis from the OG release of 2, where I
Mhm.
never really felt threatened by anyone being like, I see you, Ethan. I was like, well, then I'm going to casually stroll around the corner.
Though I mean, the
And
one
then,
thing that was in the most danger was Ethan's hand.
yes. Oh, his hands.
I'm really happy that it finally became a meme, but yeah, that the funniest part about that whole game that made me laugh out loud was when you're in the basement, you just got away from Lady D. You put your hand up to pull down the lever and it just slashes down. And like I remember pausing it, and I texted one of my friends who you know, we were already making jokes about his poor hands, and I'm like, you're not gonna believe what just happened. um I loved
Ugh.
it though, like it, but I agree where it was cool in the main castle. Like it was kind of fun at first hearing the, you know, stomping around and stuff, but like when Lady D kind of got close to you, I mean, she wasn't really hard to get away from, which
Yeah.
was kind of a bummer because once you kind of figured out her mechanic, like it was just a non-issue, which
Hmm.
um
I think in my 2 playthroughs, she hit me twice. like during like the parts where she's just walking around.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it really bothered me how few lines she had. Like every time I would bump into her, she'd be like, "Disgusting man." And then once you kill all of her daughters, it's that one line of like, "The entire bloodline of Castle Dimitrescu punched by a man like you." Like I heard
think
that
she
line
like
13
has.
times.
Yeah, like the thing is, like I think she has, because I've seen videos of her like saying lines or having interactions that I never saw. So I don't know if it's just that like you have to do weird shit to proc some of that other stuff to happen. But
There's a so
yeah.
I did do a little bit of a dive on this where there's a bunch of like, I guess it's hidden dialogue, but it's not really, where you can trigger stuff like in the main hallway. There's a scene with her and one of her daughters, who the one who usually hangs in there, talking about stuff. And there's a couple other places like that, but they require you to basically go back through the mansion. But the way the game is laid out, it's laid out like pretty linearly once you like get a feel for what's going on. So it requires you to like kind of not go on the designated path and to go back around, which is stuff that you wouldn't normally do. Unless, you know, you got completely lost and turned around again. Specifically, I'm thinking about like between the second and third sister, where it's like you find one of the masks and then you go to the roof and find like another mask immediately after that. It's basically between there and there. You would go back down, you get one of the masks, and you can actually go into the main chamber again and unlock that door. If you did that and then ran around, I think that's one of the areas where you could unlock one of those conversations that you normally wouldn't see. But normally you'd go forward, hit the bells, right, and then continue on. So
Yeah.
but yeah, and then her final fight I actually really enjoyed. I loved that her monster was just as imposing as her as a person. Like her insides matched her outsides, and I thought that was a really great metaphor. And yeah, it was like she kept talking about her family and how dare you want to save your family when what you've done to mine and stuff. And like I don't know, she was consistent, she was really good. And that last fight though, like it was one of those things. The first time I played through it, it was great, etc. It still didn't have as much depth as I would have liked it to. But yeah, I don't know. What did you guys have any thoughts on that final form?
I thought it was cool too, and it's another, like, the game I think plays a lot with like kind of references to other horror things. So like she of course is a vampire, and like maybe I'm recalling Crazy Brain, but I'm pretty sure Dracula means dragon. So the fact that she like turns into kind of a big old zombie dragon is sort of like cool little thematic bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, like it's a fun fight. She's a cool monster, and yeah, I had a good time with it.
I'd say like when I played through on hardcore the first time playing that boss, it was fine. It didn't really sink into me kind of how sort of really stupid the boss fight is, where it's just this dragon thing that if it was just like, you know what, if it just decided to fly the whole time, I would have been murdered. But it just chose to follow me in a line around the outside of a building. I don't know, have you guys, I don't want to spoil anything for it, but did you guys play Village of Shadows difficulty yet?
Not yet.
Okay, because all of the boss fights change a little bit, and the thing that changes for her boss fight is super stupid. It doesn't make any sense, and it's one of her attacks involves you need to move to a certain spot to avoid it. I'm being very vague, and I apologize.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, you know what?
Yeah.
Rob, do you care if I say
it's fine if you spoil it for me.
Okay,
Spoils
you know how
these
she throws out those maggot balls? Well, in like when you're not playing on Village of Shadows, she just shoots out one, and you just kind of have to run away from it. Well, in Village of Shadows, she shoots out two, and they come from both sides, and that single attack killed me probably like 10 times because it's an instant kill if either of the balls gets you. And I was spending so long just trying to figure out where do you possibly stand, or do you have to like juke? But to hide from this mass of tiny insects that could probably fit through a keyhole, you have to go and stand in one of the two open like end corners of the map where like there's like a place where an archer would stand to like maybe shoot arrows down at invaders. But it's just an unobstructed doorway, and the bugs will come and rub their face like on the doorway, but for some reason they can't get in and kill you. And like it was such a dumb thing that my brain didn't go like, oh yeah, just hide in the corner away from this like sentient mass of bugs that could probably go through the bars of a prison cell.
Yeah.
And like once I figured that out, like I annihilated. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt really dumb.
It was one of those that just it was a boss mechanic because a boss needs a mechanic, but it didn't make much sense when you can wave at the bugs and they can clearly see you in open air.
It's quite goofable.
Yeah, this is the first time too where it's like you get one of the boss treasures and stuff, and I really enjoyed when you took her to the Duke and she's just like, he's like, yeah, even in death she's just so beautiful. And like I loved his little quips throughout the whole thing with that. But from here, do you have any wrap up thoughts on the castle before we continue?
I have to say, overall, like looking back, especially in a second playthrough, is the castle felt smaller than Spencer Mansion did to me. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, Spencer Mansion's the whole game pretty much.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you see Castle Dimitrescu from like, when you can be like, that's huge, that's going to be a giant area to explore, and then being able to kind of just power through it in an hour and 12 minutes, I was like, So,
for sure,
it was probably the most disappointment I felt as not related to narrative, was just kind of like, I'm already done. I want to keep hanging out here more.
I get that. But yeah, I agree. That I wish we could have spent a little more time in there. But from once again, what I said is that I still think it stayed its time really well because it made me want more, and I didn't feel burned, if that makes sense. I was never angry that I didn't get to spend more time there. Because after this, we go into the part of the game that scared me more than any horror game has scared me in a very long time. If you want to check out the clip on this Twitch channel down below, you're more than welcome to. I say some really colorful words about people. And that's the dollhouse. Y'all, I gotta know what y'all thought about this area.
I thought it was... Oh, go ahead, CJ.
Oh, sorry. You continue. Yours is probably going to be much more positive. I'm trying to find this cool clip.
I was going to say, like, I loved it. I think the last time we talked about Resident Evil and we talked about 7, and I was like, you can scare me a lot, and that's fun, but if you do it for too much, it, like, gets oppressive, and it's not fun anymore. And I think this, for me, when you're saying, like, these areas stay their welcome, is like the best example of that, because it was like just the perfect amount of time where I was like, this is horrifying, but like I'm so scared. I love this and I hate it. And then I got through. So yeah, it did, like, for me it was very effective as like a horror thing, and it didn't stay so long that I shut down and stopped playing.
Yeah, I hate dolls and kids in horror movies. So, like...
Thank you for specifying in horror movies.
Yes.
A little nervous.
But no, it was just... Like, first of all, when you go to the house and you see that beautiful scene, by the way, shout out to the designers and the people who made that. It's just like that beautiful house on this overlook and stuff. But also, like, how did Ethan get pickpocketed that bad? Like, when you get into the basement, just, all my guns are gone. Oh no, I need tweezers. Like, as soon as that part happened, I knew that I was just gonna have the opposite of a good time. I really enjoyed the puzzle aspect of it. And, like, I mean, like, it just feels like they definitely were like, hey, remember PT? Like, check this out. And I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, the puzzle aspect was good. The kind of like very real horrific situation that could happen to an actual person, and that would be like a thing that Ethan would have thought about, of like a childbirth going very bad.
Mhm.
The way that they use that to like create that horror is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like
Giant
it,
well baby. Ugh.
yeah, it's man.
Giant well baby was the funniest thing I've seen in so long. That zone was really cool, and I want a zone like it in every other Resident Evil game ever, with the stipulation that the puzzles need to be a little more modular. It's like the second playthrough, it's exactly the same, which
Yeah.
was a huge bummer. But as soon as they took my guns away, I immediately thought, oh, whatever's in here that's going to be in here is going to chase me, and that's not going to scare me, because that just doesn't bug me in games, because it's like, what are they going to do? Touch me, and then all of this data I have is going to die. I'll still be fine. But the fact it was just a big goo goo gaga dad baby, like hiding under the bed, didn't feel like I was hiding under the bed. It just felt like I need to be here to get past it. But I was just chuckling at it the whole time with its big dumb face. And then when you ride the elevator back up and it like cries at you with its like floppy gam lips, I was just like, oh man, that was hilarious.
Did either of you get caught by it?
No,
I got
I had to
caught by
look
it,
up the
and it
death
ate
for
me.
it.
It
Yeah.
just eats you. Just like, hey, this is the snack. Nom.
Man. See, like I had such an opposite react where it like terrified me so bad. Like when I went and hid under the bed, I just panic hid under it from the wrong side.
Oh no.
So like I couldn't like just crawl forward. I had to like back out from the bed while the baby's like going around to the other side, and I'm just like, oh fuck, don't look at me.
I hid in the locker. Like, and you're in the locker in the back, and so it comes by you, and basically for me, I was like waiting for it to go away, and it doesn't. It just hangs out there, and so I had to basically bust out of the locker and jump over its tail, and then hear the stimp stomping behind me. Yeah, it really got me. And like on my second playthrough, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna let this thing gobble me up just so I'm like over it, right? And then it did get a little ridiculous, because I'm like, oh, this is just, I mean, yeah, it's a giant well baby. But like, it just got me deep that first playthrough. Maybe it was also, it had to do with the environment too. Like the creepy ring well that was down there was just super unnerving. And once again, being completely not having my Magnum with me was a real bummer. But yeah, I enjoyed that segment just a whole hell of a lot. It impressed me so freaking much.
For sure.
It was a very, very pleasant change of pace. Like I love escape the room puzzles, and me just being a whiny baby who's never satisfied with anything. Like I wish it was bigger, because like a lot of the puzzles, like especially going back the second time, they're not even puzzles. It's just like elongated quick time events. Like look at the arm, slide your fingers up the arm until Ethan goes, oh, there's a thing, and then pops the arm off for you. And I was just like, oh, I kind of just feel like I'm doing a very elaborate dance for this spooky wide-mouthed baby hanging out with the Ringu girl. So second time, like I was expecting like maybe like a symbol to be different, but it was like exactly the same. Even kind of jumping ahead a little bit, like the final boss was exactly the same on Village of Shadows.
the same location for the doll. Yeah, the final area too, that got me a little bit because of the dolls. But like I really like the weird, like kind of, you're almost on some kind of trip because of the gas, and they did a really good job of like animating that, I don't know, the environment around that really well, with the doll's head shaking and stuff. And it freaked me the hell out when they actually caught me one time and like started stabbing my hands again, because God forbid somebody left my damn hands alone. And I will say that her doll really did freak me out. Like even in that beginning cutscene, like right before you go into the castle, and that's what Ethan wakes up to, and it's just this weird skeleton doll looking at you. Yeah, that's
Andy,
that is disturbing as hell.
I love her face is
Yes.
I hadn't realized it at first. It's a sun and a moon.
Hmm.
So it's the
just about to talk.
Bienvento crest, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, like, but at the end, it was a little disappointing to me, at least, where it was like, okay, like maybe I'll actually be able to see her, you know, and actually face her. But it was kind of like, okay, stab, you know, the rule of three, and stab, 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 and that was it. But
Yeah.
I will be honest, the first time I played through, once again, I was ready to get the hell out of that house, so I was totally fine. I was like, all right, cool. Can I have my shotgun back? Awesome, let's go.
I want to know what was in that treasure chest in that one room we can't get in.
Me too.
Which room?
It's
There's like a rumpus, like not a, like a storage room that you can see into. It's right by
Oh,
where
yeah,
you
yeah.
find Angie the first time, and there's a chest in there where they clearly took the model from the like treasure chest that you can open
Ooh,
it up.
rude.
So you can see it through the door, and you're like, "Oh, that's treasure. I want in." And you spend like however long looking around, and then are like, "Nope, I
Can't do it.
nothing."
That's me.
That-
I love that.
Yeah, I will say that was like my one disappointment with the Bienvento house is that like there isn't really anything for you to find outside of like the puzzle pieces in the basement, which of course you're not taking with you.
Hmm.
Like I think for a game that rewards you so much for exploring, it would have been cool for there to be some rewards for exploring.
Yeah.
I was like kind of confused. Like, do you kill the lady by stabbing her doll to death, or because you're tripping balls, is it supposed to be you're stabbing the lady in the face with the scissors?
I don't know.
I don't know for sure. So I do know like so all their powers come from like the Kadu parasite that's in them, right?
Mhm.
And she has divided hers into her dolls. So like there's a certain extent to which I think her consciousness is probably literally in Angie. So I don't know because the game doesn't make it clear if you actually stabbed her in the face, but because she's making you hallucinate, it looks like Angie, which like since she can make you hallucinate, dumb move to make the thing that I'm stabbing yourself.
Yeah.
But but I don't think I think it's certainly possible that it literally was Angie that you were stabbing. Although the Angie doll seems fine after everything ends, so maybe it makes more sense that you were stabbing Donna.
Yeah, I kind of got Horcrux vibes. And so I assumed that, yeah, she was linked to the doll, which just didn't seem super far out because, like you said, like you get, it did at the beginning, but then you do get some information near the end where it's like, okay, like she was like separating this into several of her dolls and stuff, and Angie being the main one.
Yeah.
So.
Which is like she's another character who I would have liked to have gotten more of just because she seems so nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Like to be so severely like introverted to such a psychotic level that you only talk through dolls is a really interesting like mental state, and I would have liked to get more of that. And I think the fact that like Angie as a character is, you know, like has like a weird kind of annoying voice and moves around all weird, and the fact that she was like, yeah, this is what I want my consciousness to be, says something very interesting about her as a person.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you get like some brief backstory with her.
Mhm.
The most interesting part to me is when you go to her dad's house and you see the birthday sign on the wall and stuff, and like, you know, he was the violin maker. And like that was interesting, but the thing was, it's like you never really figure out what happened between like there, where like you, by all accounts, at least the history in that house, it seemed like she was a happy child, and like what happens. I don't know if it's because Mother Miranda took her and then it caused her to become super socially distant after she was infected with the parasite. But I also know that I don't know if you heard any of the backstory of the developers of this game, but originally she was supposed to be the town doctor. And that's kind of where the like body horror stuff was supposed to become, but I guess it was a little bit too intense, and so they went for dolls instead, which I don't know.
Well,
I like
so
the dolls. It freaks me the hell out, so.
she was going to be not only the town doctor, but instead of dolls, it was going to be like the ghosts of her family that she was imposing on you.
Mhm.
So like all of her family would have died, and as you were going through the manor, you would be like seeing the deaths of her family as kind of like, instead of giant baby monster, it would be ghost family.
Mhm. That's wild. I am definitely. I would love to see what that would have looked like for sure. But
Yeah.
I think it was a total success what they did pull off with it. Like I'm not
For
complaining
sure.
one way or the other. But yeah, moving on. I think to the third area. The third lord was my least favorite part of the game personally. Was Moreau.
Yep.
I liked
too.
Moreau as like this sad sap of a character. Like that didn't really bug me. But yeah, it wasn't, even the environment itself just wasn't nearly as interesting as like even the village. You know, it was just
Yeah.
kind of a
Yep.
yeah, it was kind of
Caves
a
are like-
nothing boss.
Yeah, caves are kind of like the most boring video game environment you can do.
Yeah.
And it was caves, which were not interesting, and then the water areas, which I didn't find really all that scary. They were just kind of irritating to me. I will say Moreau is the one who, like, knowing what their original concept was, I feel like it's such a shame they didn't do with him the kinds of things that I think they could have.
This is the one I know the least about the original concept.
So the original concept for Moreau, and I don't know if it's like too small to see it here, but there's another face in his back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the original concept for him was that when he mutated, the person who he loved gets caught in his back. And so she's in, like, every time that he's like shifting and in pain because he can't control his mutations, she is too.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's that like horrific, really dark idea of like the person that he loves is fused to his back and in constant pain because of the way that he shifts and can't control his mutation.
That's really interesting.
But like even with the version of him that we got, there's stuff that I think is really interesting, but like I didn't even catch it because they're so subtle with it. Or at least like maybe I'm just oblivious, I don't know. But like when you come across him in that cave and he's watching TV, apparently he's watching like a romantic movie. And the idea that he's this person who's like kind of obsessed with romance, I think would have been really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And like his area just has the lycanthrope enemies again, as I recall.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but I had like thinking about it, I'm like, what a loss. Like if they had done a like a dark version of like a Beauty and the Beast story where like he's been kidnapping women to try and make them fall in love Beauty and the Beast style, but he's dumb and is fucking it up, and he's doing experiments which like he seems too dumb to do Kato experiments, so you'd think he'd make some really grotesque stuff. And I think like if they had gone into that and had all of these horrific things, I mean maybe that would be too dark, but would also be really compelling as a horror.
I really thought with his name Moreau, it was supposed to be like alluding to the film The Island of Dr. Moreau. So I expected him to be like someone who was doing a lot of experiments and was actually going to be very intelligent, but just was ugly and gross. So there'd be someone who has an amazing personality and intellect, but are just cursed with a gross body. But then it's just like, nope, he's just gross.
Yeah.
I know I said earlier the baby was the funniest thing. I lied. I'm a liar. The thing that like on my stream, like I kind of lost it, kind of cracking up, is when you're doing the like switch puzzles and you have to like run over the things that are going up and down the different colors. The first time he breaches the water and just yells, "I'm the best!"
I remember that. I remember being in your stream when that happened. Yes.
Because I don't get. He's not saying it like, "Fuck you, I'm the best." It's like he's just so happy at his own free willy jump. And he's like, "I'm the best!" Yeah.
I was about to say sentient free willy. Like
it just like that one line made everything for almost the rest of the game not scary.
Oh,
Because no matter what was happening, like if a monster was roaring in my face before biting off my fingers, I was like, he's gonna yell, "I'm the best," and then bite my hand. I'm number one.
number
But
one.
yeah, like I found out on my second playthrough, you can actually get through like Moreau's whole like zone. I only had to fight like 2 enemies because, like, you know, the big cave encounter where you have to get the key to the boat.
Mm-hmm.
You can just sneak in and take the key and leave.
Yeah.
And I was like, this feels weird.
And
then,
we're done. We stole it.
Yeah, I was like, all right, cool. I'm on the boat. I think I just have to parkour now, and then Moreau's gonna fight me in that swamp village.
Mm-hmm.
Which his change for the Village of Shadows is dumb, where he can't be toppled anymore by explosions, so it just makes the boss fight like way more tedious.
Yeah, that just seems like it'd be longer then.
Is that, and then because, like, you know how you can't like nothing, I don't think anything in the game can one shot you. So you have to be in that like dying mode, and then something hits you and you die. Is his dive forward is a one-hit kill because it will like hit you and drop you into that pain mode, and then he has this like uppercut ability that does like an amount of damage. So if you get hit with his forward slide, you're dead.
Okay.
And I was just like, oh, this is kind of annoying.
Yeah, the one thing that stood out for me for this whole area was like you get a little bit of Chris being kind of a dickhead again. It was kind of like, honestly, a little bit of a throwaway scene, which I get. This was one of the only parts I ever got like kind of mad at the game, because like I wanted, like, this was the part of the story I really wanted to know what the hell was going on, and they definitely had an issue with teasing you, being like, well, I could tell you, but harumph, and then fish, like, you know. You know, I think that's all paid off really well, at least in my opinion, later on with Chris. But yeah, that was kind of like one of, here's a tease, now go fight giant fish man and go over there. But yeah, I liked I thought the mechanic with the acid rain, like, I don't know why, but that stands out to me in that boss fight, like being something like, oh, okay, it's a little unique, it's a little interesting. You have to get the hell out. It's not really difficult per se, but I thought it was a cool mechanic. But yeah, once you're done, it's just kind of like brush your hands off, and yeah, I don't know. It for some reason it doesn't stand out in any particular way. It seems like a generic Resident Evil boss fight, which compared to the rest of the game so far was a bummer. And then yeah, after we wrap up with that, then we get the scene by the TV with Heisenberg. And this part started to really intrigue me. I really like Heisenberg as a character. I thought he was really interesting. He had a lot of depth to him. He had a lot more depth again in his concepts that I really wish they had pulled in. But after this area, when you go back to the village, I kind of wanted to touch on, I don't know if you guys fought the Alpha Wolf.
I did not. I didn't have a lot of ammo when I saw him in the field, and I was like, oh, he big.
So I forget what their names are, but there's basically there's these giant versions of the lycanthropes that are just straight up like huge cow-sized werewolves, right? If you go up to the field, specifically after this part is where it spawns, you go back up to the house where the game starts at. There's what they call the Alpha. It's very heavily implied that is the girl who dies in the beginning. I can't remember her name, but I know if you go up there, you can find something that alludes to that actually being what she ends up becoming. I don't know exactly how, because I'm assuming she got infected when she got attacked by her father. But it was just a little story beat that I really wish they kind of like implied more. But you know, just a cool little extra bit for the village. And that was another thing about the village, is like at this point you come back and it starts to feel like, oh shit, the time's changing, the colors are different. It looked really cool. And with Heisenberg's Magneto powers, he put up all these ridiculous signs pointing your way to be like, hey buddy, go take care of this in the Werewolf Thunderdome, which for me, I really enjoyed the hell out of this section of the game. I thought it was action-packed. It was a ton of fun. There was like no downtime all the way to grandfather hammer time. Yeah, I don't know. Did you guys enjoy this bunker fight area?
I definitely did. I was really worried because like when reviews started coming out and like the game was getting like 8s and 9s, almost all of them like sort of echoed that like the last hour to 2 hours like just felt like a Call of Duty campaign where you're always shooting. So I was a little nervous, but to me it didn't feel like a Call of Duty. It felt like a Resident Evil 4 sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Where I wasn't some Ubermensch with a ton of guns. I was a scared little mold Ethan with a ton of guns. So I could kill really good, but if they bit my fingers, I would be in trouble. So I didn't feel like it was out of place at all, especially with kind of like the tone and the play style that the rest of the game encourages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It was fun.
I did think it was dumb that if you kill the wolf dude during this like the village sequence at the beginning, I was like, oh cool, this is gonna get rid of that boss later. He's just there again.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's 2 of them.
It's only supposed to be one. It's because him and then another one are 2 specific brothers.
Yeah, it's him.
Yeah.
Because he's the leader of the village, and then his brother is the one who's guarding the metamycete in the end.
So he's supposed to just be like a
Gotcha.
one-of-a-kind person, and if you kill him, he like does the thing where he drops and like turns to ash and dies. So I was like, he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just showed up again, and I was like, what?
Yeah, I was really hoping for that too. I specifically, I didn't kill him my first playthrough in the village area, but my second playthrough I had, it was my new game plus, so I took care of him. I was like, oh, I won't have to deal with this. But yeah, I get it because like I guess narratively it does make sense because he's technically the alpha of the wolf pack, and so he's supposed to be the final boss of that area. And I like that fight. That fight's intense. It being in that cramped little room with the big hammer. That was I think the one up to that point that I was most on my toes for. Mechanically, and yeah, I really enjoyed kind of learning. That felt a lot more like a Dark Souls fight, and I'm way into that. So, and then he get his
Dark
giant
Souls fight
crystal
without
hammer.
the rolling.
Yeah, without the ability to dodge, because then your hand would fall off.
Oh.
Oops, I slipped.
But then you can just put it right back on.
Yeah, exactly. Water hands. But yeah, once again, the reason I like this area so much too was it felt like a nice little break between the lords, and it was kind of like one of those things where I knew we were approaching the end with the factory and Heisenberg and stuff. I mean, I didn't know we were going there yet, but like I was like, okay, this is gonna be the last boss fight. And it was just nice to have this little like supplementary area where it was like nothing really big's happening here. This is just kind of a little breath of fresh air, and then we jump into the factory and Heisenberg, which I once again, I personally really enjoyed this section. I know this section of the game is the most controversial though, from what I've seen. But once again, I really enjoyed Heisenberg as a character. I really enjoyed his like very fuck you attitude where it was like, I really didn't ask for this, so I'm gonna make an army of super soldiers underneath a mountain. And frankly, it sounds like a Bond villain to me, and I was just sold like right off the bat. I also really liked his personality of like when he's telling you to come to the warehouse, it's like, all right, clearly this guy, he's going to fuck me over somehow. Like, we know this is going to happen. But I liked how the actor played him as, he's like, listen, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't want to work with you, but why don't we take care of this together? I don't know. It just, it seemed like a very 180 from any other Resident Evil villain I can think of. So.
Yeah, I
really had some Nick Cage vibes to me too.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh man.
Right?
That's changing everything.
Come on in.
But yeah, I really think, and kind of more unfortunate than I think fortunate, is he was the only one of the lords that really felt fleshed out and complete. Like when I was done with the factory area, especially the final boss, which I want to talk about later, like I felt satisfied. Like that was a full journey. I got to meet the villain, get what's going on. It's dumb that there's a whole factory full of monsters that are designed to kill Miranda, and Miranda's like, this is fine.
Well, and also, where is he getting all of those bodies from?
That is true.
That tiny ass village.
Yeah, I honestly, I didn't really stop to think about that. That's a really good point. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was I really liked the whole like I'ma make cyborgs thing. Like I don't know. I'm a big sci-fi head, and so for some reason it
Mhm.
just and he seemed crazy enough to be able to like pull this off because he wasn't a dumb guy. You know, he was very much a guy who like he hid how smart he was, and I really appreciated that about him. I did want to talk about his backstory too. That was supposed to be in the game, but something they pulled that I really wish they had kept was Propeller Head. I forget exactly. That's kind of what he's called on the internet. I forget exactly what
Brom.
his name is. Yeah. It was originally going to be Heisenberg's father, and he had
Yep.
turned his dad into this. And I thought that would have been like, even if they would have just done it in notebooks, I thought that would have been such a
Mhm.
cool extra bit. That I'm actually, it was the only thing I'd read that I was really disappointed that they didn't add to the game.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
that
it's
pretty
that thing was
weird.
horrifying.
Strom is for me is like the best part of those sections, even though I hate being chased by things. But I mean, that's why he's effective. But also, like, I like the robots, but they also, I don't know, they're I guess cyborgs. They felt very much like Borgs, and as a Star Trek fan, I can appreciate that. But
Mhm.
also, like, I would have appreciated some more that were like as weird as Strom is, where he's like literally a plane engine, but the propellers are chainsaws, and he's accidentally chopped his own arms off.
Yeah, that was a really
And
cool little subtle thing that I liked.
yeah, and just like it would have been really cool to have more enemies that were as off the wall as he
Mhm.
was.
For sure. I think the idea of just like having enemies that are just effectively just industrial equipment with legs
Mhm.
walking around would have made for really cool encounters of like maybe enemies bumping into each other, just like shredding them apart to like kind of
Mhm.
create
Mm.
a more interesting gameplay. Because like the only ones that kind of stood out to me, but almost in a bad way, because I'm like, these are dumb, are those weird dudes with the jetpacks.
Yeah, the fighter plane
Yeah,
thing.
and I
Yeah.
was just like this feels like this whole zone was not built for jetpack men, but you know what? Okay. But like the normal dudes, they really remind me of the flesh pounds from Killing Floor. I don't know if you guys played that, but that's just the enemy unit I just saw the whole
Mhm.
time.
Mm.
The one thing I thought was cool that I don't think I fully appreciated until I was through the area was I really liked the melding thing, or the press. What do you call it? Where you had to
Where you could
find
like make the keys and
the
stuff.
molds. Yeah, when you had to
Mm.
find the
Mm.
various molds, wink wink, and make the
Ah,
keys and the marble and stuff like that. Like it was one of those
Mhm.
things where I was like, oh, this kind of feels a little fetch questy, which it is, but it for some reason it just so successfully took you through the full area, and it was just a unique little
Mhm.
mechanic. I thought it was really creative about how they actually used this, like the environment as itself as part of the puzzle to get through it. I thought that was really cool.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this I don't know if this worked out this way for any of you guys, but for me it ended up being kind of intense too, because sometimes I would just like run away from enemies, going to the mold machine, and they'd like chase me
Hmm.
there, and then you're like waiting for the for the key to get made,
It's like, well,
and yep.
I had that issue the last time you have to go down there through the dark
Mhm.
because I was like, all right, fuck this, let's just run through, let's go there, and like three or four of them start wandering through the door. I was very low on ammo at that point too.
Mhm.
Not a good time. But yeah, I enjoyed the heck out of it. I thought the design too of the factory was just super overwhelming in the best way.
Mhm.
Like especially when you go out in the elevator parts and you look out and it's just like it was just so I don't know, like steampunk in like a fucked up
Yeah.
way. And I don't know. I dug the whole aesthetic. I once again a lot of things that I've read online and stuff is just people have a lot it's like, oh, it's nothing like the rest of the game and etc., which I agree with, but I thought that was really
Mhm.
cool because it broke it up completely to this whole different thing. And then we do get to go up to the top and we get punched immediately back down and run into our buddy Chris, who tells us I don't agree with Chris's motives. I'll put it that way. um, yeah, this was a really weird scene because this is the part where he tells him about Mia, if I remember correctly,
Mhm.
where it's like, yeah, that wasn't Mia, that was Mother Miranda that we murked this whole time.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it's like, bro, you really should have said something.
Yeah. In the amount of time that it took you to tell me that you didn't have time to tell me, you could have just told me that was not Mia.
Yeah. And, you know, you kind of expected it because she was acting so weird. It's like, okay, this makes sense. But yeah, it's... Could have
just the most Resident Evil 6 part of this game.
That's fair. But he quickly redeems himself by giving you a tank, which is cool.
Yes.
And yeah, you were saying you really enjoyed this boss fight, so I'll let you CJ talk about this and lead the charge on here. But I will say before we get into it, my favorite line in the game happens when you get up there and the factory explodes. And Heisenberg turns around and says, "I'll get that boulder punching asshole." It made me so happy.
That was really good. But this is, I'm whining a lot about this game, but it's a game that I really like. I have to keep saying that. Village was awesome. Is that for Resident Evil as a whole series, I don't think it's a series that does boss fights well, like, at all. I can't think of a single boss fight in any of the other games that kind of like stood out and were fun and exciting. They just kind of either run away from an enemy in an isolated room while firing a gun, or in like maybe like in 3's redux of fighting Nemesis, where you had to shoot all of its pustules and then shoot it with a rocket cannon. That was kind of cool. But man, this was the first Resident Evil boss I can remember where it was fun and exciting, and it felt over the top and crazy, and it was just from start to finish, I was engaged the whole time. And it just, like, when you look at it from like kind of a macro perspective, it's dumb. You're just having battle bots in the middle of a field.
Yeah.
But when it's against Magneto, and you're at that point, you think you're just a dude who just has a really high tolerance for pain. It feels awesome. Like, that felt like I was in a comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just good the whole way. Like, that to me, hands down, unless there's one I'm missing and I can't think of, is the best boss fight in Resident Evil as a franchise.
I enjoyed the heck out of it as well. For a lot of the same reasons, you know, when we talked about the series in the previous podcast, I said the one thing that I did like about 6 is I loved how much anime bullshit was in that game. And I felt that from this fight, but in like a consistently, like, I don't know, it made sense, like, narratively, even though it's like there's no reason for you to have a tank, but it makes sense why you have a tank. There was no like bullshit leading up to it. It was ridiculous enough, and they had reasoning for it. And I appreciated that, because that is hard to pull off. Especially, you know, yeah, as you said, you know, Magneto powers, like, that was just its own set of fun. But yeah, I don't know, I enjoyed the heck out of this boss fight. I wish there were more phases, though. That was my big thing. Yeah. So but after we successfully take care of Heisenberg, this is the part of the story that shit gets to go sideways for the better or for the worse, I think, as far as a lot of people are concerned. But I will say, I really enjoyed this scene before we really find out anything, when Mother Miranda comes and just straight up takes your heart out as Ethan, and kind of like gives you her whole like, here's my bad guy spiel, which I appreciated very much. There was a part of me that really wished that this is how Ethan died. Because I thought it was super, like, weirdly poetic in a way. I was like, huh, okay, I can get behind this. What were y'all thoughts on this scene?
Man, yeah.
Are we just talking about Miranda showing up and killing you?
I wanted to just wrap this part up, and then we can go into the end game stuff, if that's all right with y'all.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Overall, I think it's good. The only sort of like, wait a minute thing it introduced was the fact that old lady was Miranda the whole time. And that kind of puzzled me, because like the old lady herself, like, in her words, she's like, Miranda's been fucking up this village. And I was like, wait, so Miranda was saying that she fucked up the village. Like she's saying she's blaming herself. Like what's happening? So that was really
Playing
the
mind
only thing.
games.
I guess, but that's kind of a lazy thing. Is just it was a mind game trick because she. Then when I thought about it before, I was like, oh, maybe she's trying to like act as a guide, but she just is actively being annoying and vague. So it's more like that old lady was just like her avatar of trolling.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on a second playthrough when I was trying to pay attention to like things that maybe it's hinting to it. I'm just like, no, this still is stupid.
That's fair. The old
But
lady
the scene
seemed like a very
itself was cool.
non-issue just throughout the game, but
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed this, like just my first time playing through this when she just like straight up marks Ethan in the field. I was like, this is actually really cool. And like I actually had a chat with my chat while we were going through this, and I'm like, I'm a little pissed off. It was weird. It didn't feel like there was an end or anything, but like weirdly enough, I was okay with it. Of course that's not the case. We get more Ethan in the end, but this next part though, when we jump into Chris's bit and he's like, it reminded me of Into the Spider-Verse when they go between Spider-Man. It's like, all right, let's go over this one more time. And it shows you like, hey, okay, here's what happened, etc., etc. And I'm glad that they finally kind of laid out for us, but I also am glad that Chris's team gives him shit about it. Like,
Yeah.
my biggest hang up on this is I'll kind of get to it narratively afterwards. Was there's a big narrative plot hole that I didn't enjoy with Chris's segment. However, Chris's segment in this game is fun as hell.
Yeah, I think
it's great.
All of it is really fun, except I don't like having to use the like orbital missile thing.
Yeah, that was a little rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was okay. Like getting to kill a whole field of lycanthropes with a missile strike felt really cool, but the fight where you're like running around the dude with back tentacles felt kind of dumb.
Yeah. You can kill him without using the orbital strike on him, but it takes a minute. Yeah, it's I don't know. This section was once again, like especially after my first playthrough on not New Game Plus, when you just get this amazing, automatic weapon and just get to mow down the village without remorse. It was such a like cathartic moment for me because I got my first playthrough. I got my ass handed to me throughout the entire game. So this was a great change of pace for me. And then of course this is also the segment where bits that I really loved about it. I will talk about really quick. The thing that I didn't like about Chris's segment was the BSAA part of the whole thing. So I wasn't aware that Chris is no longer with the BSAA technically.
Yeah.
And at the end they kind of show something about them using bioweapons. The BSAA was sending in bioweapons here. I didn't see any of that, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention during Chris's playthrough. Or his segment.
No, I did not catch any of it at all either.
Okay.
And it would have been like if they'd integrated it into that section where you were like, oh, hey, there's lycanthropes here, but also like, what are these guys?
Yeah, like mini tyrants almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the one part about this that like really bugged me because I was like, this would have been really cool to like really mix up this. But we get to see the Metamycete, which is fucking disturbing, but really cool. It's like, hey, this is the cause of literally everything, it turns out, as we find out when we go into Miranda's chambers. And this was like the moment in the game where I'm just like, okay, this whole game was worth it. I loved this part. I know a lot of people have varying opinions, but when I found that note with Spencer left for her, and that I fell in love with this whole game, and it made me love 7. Like, I didn't like 7. That part of the game made me appreciate the hell out of 7. When we find out about Spencer and then the mold and what Evie was, or Evelyn was. Yeah, the backstory about everything. It was so great. I don't know. What were y'all's thoughts on this?
I definitely liked the way that it tied everything together. I will say one thing that I find disappointing is that like Miranda's kind of the big bad of the game. And like with the other lords, you get some of the same kind of stuff where you're like learning their history, but it's spread out through a whole area. And I would have really liked if there was a whole area for Mother Miranda instead of like it's a great exposition dump, but it also is kind of an exposition dump. But yeah, I mean, it was like cool to see that tie into the rest of Resident Evil. I Another thing I will say is like I like the backstory of Mother Miranda, but because we're getting it all in text, I think she would have been more compelling if like she has some actual pathos and moments where you like see her suffering because of the loss of her child, and you never see that. It's just implicit in her actions and in the notes that she leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So
I thought it was like when I read that note, my initial feeling was more of just like that's neat. I felt similar to how I felt when I was playing 5 for the first time, and you learn about the flower that was the thing that was made into the T virus, but it's also the thing that lets you like fiddle around with the Lost Plaga. So like 5 felt like it had the "this is where everything comes from" moment, where it was linking the original games to 4 and 5. And they're like, yep, everything comes back to Africa, which is like where humanity started out. So that's like thematically appropriate. Cool. So this felt like they're just like, it was more of like a psych, this is the true origin. So now I'm going to be afraid for every other Resident Evil game. It's going to be like, psych, this is the thing that made the Mega My seat.
Resident Evil Origins Odyssey.
Yeah, it's just gonna keep going layers down until the sun dies. And yeah, so it was cool, but like it didn't feel impactful since they've already kind of done this trick already.
That's fair. I guess, I will say I see that and I totally get it. I think 5 just didn't have any impact for me when I played it because I just didn't like that game at all. That I think this gave me the impact that 5 should have.
That's completely understandable.
Yeah.
But
I will say
way better narrative.
Like one other thing about this one though, and I guess like maybe it's good, it's good to have like questions that leave you wondering. But like we learn the Umbrella logo in a cave that's in the village is like the origin of the Umbrella logo. But we don't learn like what the Umbrella logo was in the cave for. So like, and I don't know, maybe that's something they're planning to explore in a later game. It probably is, but
yeah, that definitely was a little bit of an open-ended segment, but yeah, it was something I guess I never really thought about it too much because I was like, oh, this is like for some reason, like I just figured it was part of the Giant's Chalice like ceremony thing, like a symbol for the Giant's Chalice, like that seemed important, and the Umbrella logo was there, so I didn't really question it further. But thinking about on it, I agree. I mean, it'd be cool. It's another option for them to explore, and I hope they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, this segment, and then there was also all the books about each one of the characters, and you get more of the Lord's backstories and stuff, which was pretty fascinating. But I really liked how they kind of had Evie in there, or Evelyn in there too, and they were just like, hey, somebody also came, and it's like, how did they know about this? Were they friends of Spencer or whatever? Like clearly other people knew that this was a thing that happened, or Miranda was here. But having that tie into Evelyn, once again, made me like Evelyn a lot. In that whole story. I don't know. For some reason, it just made 7 so much better for me. But yeah, and then from here, we run into Mia finally, who's been kidnapped for. This was a little thing I had weird. It's like, how long has Mia been here? I don't know. And then we get the Ethan backstory, and I'm very curious to know about what y'all think about Mr. Mold Ethan. CJ?
I not to shit on Capcom because they make so many games that I love, but like especially with Resident Evil, like part of my brain has to like I have to almost like reach in and turn it off to enjoy the whole game because I know that there's going to be dumb writing. And this game kind of did a disservice where like it was competent enough that part of my brain like was on, So my first thought was like, oh, he was a mold monster. So how did no one know he was a mold monster? If he was taken in by Blue Umbrella, who I'm sure have military level biotech to like run tests to be like, hey, are you okay? Didn't realize that his whole body was now full of mold. So that was dumb.
One person knew.
Who?
Mia.
Mia knew, yeah.
Well, oh, she did? I must have. Wait,
yeah, because Chris is like, he's dead, and Mia says to him, no, Ethan's more special than you realize. So
okay,
she knew.
Oh, I didn't take that as like she necessarily knew, just more like don't count Ethan out.
Well, I mean, also like she's in the picture with Miranda, so she's been like part of this research. Whatever's going on here, she knows a lot more than she's let on. So like, I am fully ready to believe that she knew Ethan was a mold monster.
That makes sense, and I'm even willing to like accept that. Oh, he's a mold person, and that he's starting to die. I don't know how soon you guys want to jump to talking about ending events, but the resolution of Ethan's whole character, I think, is stupid and wasteful. And that to me, like the ending of his story was a big punch, not to my gut, but to like my ear, and it hurt and it wasn't cool. Like that's how I felt. Like, so I don't know if we want to get there yet, but
that's
just
fair.
the reveal that there's like a pocket dimension where all of these like consciousnesses can exist is one, both cool for like exploration purposes, but it's also very worrying because now it feels like anything can be undone, anyone can be resurrected at this point in Resident Evil. So it's almost like they've just now given themselves like this massive safety net for all narrative decisions moving forward in the series.
Deus Ex Mold Machina?
The like anything can be undone though doesn't feel neat, because I think I even said this on our last podcast when we were talking about Wesker. I was like, it's Resident Evil. If they want to bring him back, they'll find a way. And like,
yeah,
I will say, like, I think it's cool that he was mold the whole time. It didn't really surprise me. I think I'd had some suspicions that something was weird, like when he can just pour medicine on his hand and put it back on. I'm like, that feels a little bit beyond the magic power of liquid from a bottle. I
definitely thought the medicine was supposed to be like the more magical aspect in all those incidents. So that was kind of cool. Learning that you were dead the whole time of 7 was a little interesting, but it also made me confused, like why they had you tied up at the start and stuff. Like it just made me ask a bunch of questions that I don't think I'm ever going to get answers for, because I'm just like, that feels kind of dumb and weird.
I will save my thoughts on this a little bit because for when we do our conclusion, because I think mine tie more into the overall story than the immediate. But I will say with this segment, the thing that it really hit me hard when you jump back in the quick flashback with Jack dragging you and her saying that Jack murdered you. And I was like, I don't know, for some reason, like flashbacks rarely work for me, whether it's in games or movies. For some reason, that really worked with me. And it, for good or for bad, it stuck with me. And I thought it was really well done, especially, and I think it hit even harder because it was Evelyn telling you that. And I was like, oh, of course, it makes sense if he's this person. She's obviously still with him somehow because she's the reason he's this way. It all tied together in a really cool way for me. That segment did stand out specifically for me throughout that bit. But yeah, for the Miranda fight, before we go into like the final conclusions and our final thoughts, etc., for the story and stuff, the Miranda fight was really great for me for a gameplay perspective. Even from the narrative perspective, when it finally came together, it was like there was an actual payoff here where you walk into this mold and it's like, hey, she has Rose, and you know, shit's about to hit the fan. Chris like does some weird like, hey, look over here, and like thankfully is able to get Rose out of there. But this, when I mentioned earlier about that the Dark Souls fight feel, I felt like this
Mhm.
felt that way too, because there were actually like big phase changes in this fight, and it was definitely the most interactive fight in the game. I really enjoyed the hell out of it. It was really annoying. It took me about an hour to beat the first time, and that was just on casual. But yeah, I enjoyed the heck out of this fight, and I really like Miranda as a villain. What do you guys think?
I enjoyed the fight. I found it irritating sometimes too, though, just because it had that Dark Souls element to it, but you don't have a dodge like you have in Dark Souls. And I like the I mean, the sluggishness is part of the design where like Ethan just doesn't move that fast,
Hmm.
but it also makes it hard sometimes. I think I got kind of lucky because I just had a hilarious amount of ammo by the time I got to the end of the game. So I think I only died like once in the fight. Um, but I still remember being like, I just wish I could move faster or dodge or do anything. Um, but it's like a cool design fight. I also like the transformations. I will say the move where she turns everything into like pitch blackness was kind
That
of
was
like
that was annoying.
I want to be able to
Yeah.
see.
That one was
But
very quickly. I don't know what game. Like I had some weird like memory callback of like, oh, this is a Unix system. I know this. And I just started running around the outside of the map, and that seemed to work.
mm,
And she couldn't hit me when I did
yeah,
that. So I was like, I don't know where I learned this tactic, but it seems to be working just fine for me. And that's how I got away with the pitch blackness.
Yeah, that fight for me like was serviceable. It felt like a Resident Evil normal boss fight, so based on what I've said before, you can probably tell I didn't super care for it. The transformation was cool. It felt like it went on too long. Like playing on hardcore, I went into that fight with like I had one Magnum round and then some shotgun. So I died the most. Probably died for like 30 minutes. It was rough.
yeah. I remember
But
you like almost were like, we'll just have to do this next stream with that one.
yeah, I was definitely starting to get just like since we'd played for like 4 hours, I was just getting a headache from the spotlights and I was just getting Wu-Tanged on so hard, and I was like, oh, it's rough. But I feel like there was a big missed opportunity from the fact that by this point you've learned that you're no longer human. You're like a monster.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
fighting Miranda, I still just felt like I was human dude Ethan. So I really feel like since this is also in retrospect like Ethan's big send off as a physical being, I wish they would have
Hmm.
leaned in harder with even if it was like stuff like set pieces in the middle of the fight, not even necessarily like gameplay, of two
Hmm.
monsters slamming into each other. Like parts where like maybe you'd have like your limb cut off, but then you use like your hand to stab her into the thing with your other loose limb. I don't know. Just
Get the
I just
pierce
felt like
laser from 6.
what?
The pierce laser from 6,
Pierce
where
laser.
his arm turns into the
Yes.
Oh
weird
yeah, yeah,
electric
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, something like
yeah.
that where I wish I like I don't know what it would have been, but I wish it would have felt more like a clash of beasts rather than dude versus weird spider lady.
Hmm.
I felt like that fight just also went on way too long and was kind of boring after a while.
Hmm.
But like I said, I don't really think as a whole Resident Evil does boss fights super great.
Yeah, I will definitely say that this fight did start to get annoying for me near, like the 50-minute mark, when it's one of those things where it's like I know her animations, I know what to do, I know to shoot the blobs, etc., but I misstepped and didn't go quite as around as I should have, and one of her spider legs took all my health away,
Mm.
Yep.
when it's like, oh, I should have really easily gotten away with this, but you can't exactly look at her when you're running away from her. Um, but yeah, it was I thought it was just a overall a really solid conclusion, because I think the majority of the boss fights I got through pretty quickly. Like I didn't even on harder modes, I didn't really struggle with them.
Mhm.
But I think I just we know Resident Evil bosses at this point. It's like, okay, I can go into any of these fights and kind of understand what I need to do. And it was nice to have
Mhm.
one that kind of seemed more involved and seemed like much more of a wall.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I feel like they could have once again, like you were saying, just done a little bit more with it, especially with with Ethan, because yeah, it was just, I didn't think about that until just now, but I completely agree with that, where they really could have pulled out something unique with him as a character at this point, because he knew he was, especially him knowing he's kind of invincible at this point, or to a point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like I don't think the game communicates this very well. I think what they were going for is like he's barely managed to pull himself back together from having been killed by Miranda previously.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think if they had made that explicit, like, oh, he brought himself back, but there's not a lot of juice left. And the fact that he's like falling apart literally by the time it's
Yeah,
over,
that's true.
I think sort of like plays into that theory of he didn't have much juice left. But
Yeah.
The thing I just don't understand about him not having much juice left is like, yeah, Miranda pulled out his heart, but his heart's made of mold. He's just a big mold monster. Why would that kill him?
Placebo effect?
Like that, it's like that sort of like I have to come up with like some weird dumb reason to be like, oh, it made him so sad that it hurt. But it's like his whole body is basically just one giant pile of lasagna. So pulling out a specific part shouldn't fuck him up any more than pulling another part would have.
That's fair.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe you could make the case that like it's less that he is a pure thing of mold like the molded from 7 rather than like the mold is just so thoroughly integrated into him. Maybe the mold has just like replicated into the form of a human, and that's why they couldn't even, like, the science teams didn't even catch it, is because the mold is just so perfectly human. I'm very much playing devil's advocate for them, but
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If they, even if there was just a line in a page that was like his mold, like if Mia would have had a diary note in her cell that's like his mold is so crazy good at being human they can't even tell, then I would have completely forgiven it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that there's nothing about it just made me be like, wait, what? Like the whole rest of the game for like the last hour and a half, I was just like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It settled with me a little bit better, I think, overall with his story, and I think now is a good time to kind of jump into the conclusion of this, in my opinion, absolutely wonderful game. I with Ethan and his story, like, I really, the hero sacrifice is always kind of cheesy depending on how you go about it, but I thought it was worth it in the end for him, because like you said earlier, Rob, is like he's literally falling apart. He's not going to make it out of here. I like how he, basically is a martyr here and destroys the Metamycete, etc., puts it down.
Yeah.
It's, once again, I still wish we would have gotten a little bit more of what's going on with Chris, etc. In the end, we kind of get that tease of the BOWs with BSAA, which it seems like that's what the next one's going to be following from kind of the hints they lined up. But the thing I really liked about Ethan, and the thing that really wraps around this whole thing and almost made it so much more canon to me, not that it wasn't canon already, but in my head with the entire series, is that Ethan to me was a fluke as far as the mold is concerned, right? Kind of like what you were saying, where if there was a diary page that was talking about how, like, oh, he's so crazy good at this happening and like etc. He was like almost like Wesker was, right? He was this genetic anomaly that wasn't supposed to happen, but he did, and it was so good that he once again didn't even know what he was. I for some reason, that thinking about that aspect of it really made everything else not bug me that much about him being, because at first I was like a little bit like, oh really, they're kind of pulling this away, but then I go back to what I was talking about with Evelyn and stuff, and that bringing that whole thing in, because at first I was like, why is he seeing Evelyn? And it's like, oh well, she was connected to everything in that house, and she's what made him, so clearly a piece of her is still going to be with him, and that's what makes her be able to be here talking to him face to face. Say if it was a dream state or not, I don't know, but in my head canon, that's kind of how that all made sense. And yeah, I really loved the end of Ethan's character here. I thought it was well deserved once the whole story had been told, if that makes sense. Yeah. But
CJ,
yeah.
do you want to make your complaints, or do you want me
I
to
want
go?
to hear
No.
them. I do.
All right, here we go. Let me get my notebook.
All right.
First and foremost, the thing that is always a giant red flag of being like, this was not well written overall, like this was written fine, is killing your main character is one of the worst things you could do most of the time, because it's usually just done by lazy writers who are like, the best way to finish a story you care about is just to kill it, because you don't have to worry about what comes next. They're dead. And there are definitely times, there are a number of video games that have made me cry, I won't spoil them here, where the death has been built up and it's deserved and it's impactful. This was not one of them. Like, you didn't get enough time to sort of come to terms that Ethan was going to die. And then also, like, one thing I see a lot of is people referring to what he did by blowing himself up as a sacrifice. But it wasn't. He was fucked regardless of who pulled that button at the end. If Chris blew up the Mega My seat, he was gonna die. If he stayed even corporeal for a few more days, he was gonna fall apart and die. Blowing up the thing with himself naturally is going to kill him. Because even at the very end, when it kind of plays the rest of that storybook, it says like the burned forest is like a sigil of, or a vigil for the father's sacrifice. It's like, well, those aren't the same setup at all. The father in that story wouldn't have got to keep living if he didn't go in and save his daughter. He was doomed. I really appreciate, like, it. Ethan was shown off as being like, I fully grasp that he was a loving father, and the fact where he was told, hey, you're gonna die, and his only concern was Rose. That's excellent. But like, it's the sadness of, I'm gonna go blow myself up now. Like, he wasn't doing anything even really heroic or special. It was the thing that made the most sense, I guess. Like, it just felt weird. Like, why not just get on the helicopter and say goodbye to Mia and then blow up the thing with, unless the other thing that's crazy is, unless Chris's whole idea was like, whoever's blowing up the Mega My seat has to stand within 30 feet of it, which seems like a major logistic oversight. So I don't know. It felt
Chris's
like a very
track record this
forced
game. Like,
That's true. So to me, just it felt like a bad death, to be honest. Like, when it was starting to get there, I'm like, oh, they're gonna kill him. To me, what I think would have been better, and this is just me whining and being a baby and having wishes, is I really feel like he should have survived this game and then had one more in this trilogy where you go into it knowing I'm falling apart. So you know by the end he's going to be dead. So you and Ethan sort of have those 7 or 5 stages of grief?
It's 7.
Yeah, you guys go through those stages of grief together, and then maybe have a thing where it's like, oh, if he didn't kill himself, he could survive a little longer, but then he does something to blow himself up. I don't know. It was frustrating for someone who has my tastes in narrative, I guess. And that's all of my big baby whining for now.
Well, now we'll make the sandwich, because I also liked the ending.
That's fine.
I mean, I don't think it was the strongest. I do agree with some of your criticisms. Like, and I hadn't even thought about it before, but like, I think you're right that if there had been some buildup where like he knows he's going to die and then dies, it would have been stronger. But also, like, and this kind of ties back a little bit to what we were saying earlier with the storybook. I think the theme of this game is about like parental love, because it's like, it's not just Ethan, it's also Mother Miranda. You're seeing two people who are going to extreme lengths for the love that they have for their children, which is part of what I find disappointing about Miranda as a character, where I'd like mentioned earlier that we don't really get to see pathos from her. She's just like villain mode the whole time. And I think that conflict would have meant more to me if we got to see her sadness over the loss of her child. But getting, like, the whole game, Ethan's whole thing is just, I have to get Rose back. and the fact that he gives everything he's got and dies in the process. You know, even like if you're saying blowing up the Megamycete isn't a sacrifice, you know, when he brought himself back, arguably one, he hauled himself back from the other side barely because of his love for Rose, and then he like went into a battle knowing he had nothing left again because of his love for Rose. Like I think I appreciate that, and I will also say like, well, I will not be shocked if he shows up alive again at some point in time. But also like the Resident Evil games, I think the main characters always feel like they have plot armor to me. And the fact that Ethan doesn't have plot armor at the end of the game, I feel like gives some stakes back to it in a way. But
just in, I don't know, just in general, it just felt like a very unnecessarily safe ending. Like there wouldn't have been any more emotional whatever if he would have like gotten to survive. Like him dying didn't serve any thematic purpose, to me at least. Like it was just a thing they did to hit you with the feels.
well, it made
Like,
me
yeah.
feel some feels for whatever
Yeah.
it's worth.
I guess. Like I don't know, if Mia would have blown herself up so that like Ethan could stay alive to protect Rose, like that would have felt like something meaningful and impactful to me. But
I totally agree with those criticisms. I think my optimism though is lying on the fact that we know we're getting another game, and the way that this game not only wrapped up questions but further moved the story in a direction I'm really enjoying. Like I said, it answered so many questions I had about 7, while, you know, like I said, adding, I think, constructively to this trilogy series as a whole, that I think we're going to get some of those answers coming up. Like I am very optimistic that this whole subplot that's going on with Mia is going to be resolved here in number 3, because like we were talking about earlier, there is something much deeper from the surface level that we don't know about that's going on specifically with this character. So I'm really hoping that I'm really optimistic that that's the way this story is going to start concluding, and we are going to get a lot more, even if we don't see Ethan again as a character. I really think he's going to be a part of it, for that reason. And like I said, it just based on this game and how it treated the last game for me, I really have high hopes for that, for the future of what's coming. So yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
I'm a big old sucker for the father story, so that too kind of got me, because I'm like, oh my god, he gave a shit. But yeah, and also that last scene too, where we do get a little sneak peek at Ethan there at the very, very end of the game before the credits roll, which I thought was really sweet.
like I would completely not be surprised if the next game you do play as Rose, where Ethan is sort of just like a character who exists in her mind due to their Mycete connection, who just like she'll look over and there'll just be Ethan like sitting at a table and being like, "Hey Rose, you're doing good. Keep it up.
Let me help you with that algebra." I mean, he could very easily be her Evelyn, right?
Yeah, hopefully he'll not be an asshole, but yeah, he could just be this like sort of ghost guide that she can talk to, and he kind of guides her, still being a father figure, and that would be fine. But then at the same time, that just turns Ethan sort of into a gimmick for another game later. So his total end purpose was to be a ghost shaman. I don't know. I am just always against protagonists dying unless you execute it flawlessly, which means usually playing a game that's 30 to 40 hours with really good character development.
Listen, I come from the filmmaking world. That's all we do is kill main characters now. Haven't you seen The Walking Dead? It's what makes money.
And well, that's also why so many people who love the comics hate that show. And why people always go, the book was better, and then they adjust their glasses super hard. But yeah, so that was just my very specific problem with the ending.
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
I'm very excited for a sequel. If the sequel you are playing as Rose, I'll finally get that game I've wanted since the end of 6, where it would be Jake in that instance of getting to play a Resident Evil from the perspective of someone who just isn't a rookie on their first day of police camp or a bumbling scientist. It's like, no, I'm a bioweapon designed to kill bioweapons. Let's get nuts.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I worry that Rose is like too powerful to be the protagonist though. Just because like the whole reason that 8 happened is because she was like the most powerful thing ever. That's why Miranda took her. It's pretty heavily implied that the reason you're able to beat Miranda is because somehow, even as a baby, Rose somehow knew to suck the power out of her, which is kind of nuts. And just like, if you have someone who can literally suck the power out of the final boss character, how are you going to put them in a situation where it feels like there's realistic danger for them? But
if I had to guess, if they're going to do kind of like an expansion what they do with 8, is I wouldn't be surprised if 9 you start playing as Rose and you start off like as basically 80% full power potential Rose, and you're just like waylaying through enemies, and then you just get classic Metroidvania where you get hit with something that just like fucks up your powers, and the game is about getting back to where you were and then getting even stronger. So maybe the final boss fight of that game will feel like Godzilla versus King Kong, but better.
What are you talking about? Better.
I'm sorry. I forgot there was Hollow Earth theory in it, so it's the perfect movie.
No, I agree. The Metroidvania aspect, I think, would actually be a really solid way to go about this. I could also just think about like the Infamous style, where it's like, hey, I have all these things, but I don't know what I'm doing with them, right?
Exactly.
Like I thought that was always very, especially if y'all had played a Second Son. I fucking love that game, and I thought they did a really good job of that, being like, hey, I'm a super powerful person. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna keep fucking up until we do figure this out. So I could see them doing that pretty well too.
I'm sure Capcom are the masters of just bullshit in video games, so I'm sure they can find some way to make Rose not the Omni King until the end of the game. But maybe I had heard some reports that I don't know are true, and I don't want to be, is that Rose's story may not even be 9. It might be its own game, because like I think we've talked about it before, like how Devil May Cry was originally built as a Resident Evil game, but it felt too weird, so they made it its own series. Is that Rose's game may be like an action-based super spin-off, and then 9 may follow, I don't know, Mia or something. I don't think it'll follow Chris. There's one thing I kind of wanted to touch on before we left the scene, but we kind of moved through it really fast, is playing as Chris felt amazing to me. Like, it felt like the only time I can really think of where you get to play as someone who has been built up as a super badass, and then you get to feel like a super badass. So I don't think it's appropriate to make him a protagonist of any of the other games moving forward, because he's too strong and it wouldn't be scary.
Well, going back to what you were saying as far as like how they're proceeding with it, is that first of all, I think having a Mia game would be awesome to kind of conclude this series. Like I think that's almost the most logical way to complete it. I don't think they'll do Rose because that's too far in the future. But what we do know that there's going to be a third one that wraps up this series, and then from here on out they are doing standalone games. Like they've confirmed that the next part of this, whatever this Resident Evil series is, are going to be a series of vignettes in their own game. So I could very easily see one of them being dedicated to Chris, one of them being dedicated to Rose, etc. In fact, I would almost prefer to see that. Because like I said, personally, I really want that tight bow on the end of this trilogy that we have going on right now, and I don't think Rose is the correct character to put that bow on. Just because once again, it seems like it'd take place way too far in the future.
I feel like the problem with having Mia as the person you play as, though, is that a lot of the mystery that we need to resolve is stuff that she knows.
Yeah.
So, like, she knows too much to be the perspective that we're learning everything from.
That's fair. Yeah, for sure.
I also super wouldn't mind it being Rose, because like you have concerns about being too far in the future, which are completely valid because time jumps are tricky and it can often just be spots for lazy writing. But it could also be due to the events of Village, there have been like world changing implications, like the BSAA, which from I keep forgetting whether or not it's more of like a secret organization or like an actual recognized branch of the government that like civilians could look up and be like, that's a BSAA helicopter. Is that what they're doing? Their bio shenanigans is maybe a decade of BSAA slowly turning into the new umbrella could set up enough conflict to send in Rose.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I can honestly say though that whatever they do choose to do after this game, I even if it sounds a little offbeat at first whenever we get that preview, I'm all in. Like this game,
for sure.
Yeah.
like I'll unless there's anything else, I kind of want to jump into my final thoughts here because I know we've been going for almost 2 hours, which has been fantastic, by the way.
Having a lot of fun.
But this game, like stacking up to the rest of the series, I think is it's right up there with I had to really think about this. It's right up there with 3, where the 3 remake is my favorite game in the series, but Village is my favorite game. That happens to be
your
part
favorite
of
game, period?
Well, that happens to be part of this series, right?
Oh, okay.
It's still absolutely in my top 5 games now, though. Because like I said, I've beat this game 6 times now. I am still having fun playing through it. I love how the story's paced. I love all of the characters. Some of them are weaker than most, but I still know everything about them. They're not like completely forgettable. Like even Moreau at the end of the day, it's like I still know him better than so many other antagonists in so many other games. Even like you said, the reservoir, it's like, yeah, that was kind of a down point, but it's like I still remember and can recall the windmills, and I know that mechanic in the back of my head. Even it's not forgettable. Even the slow points in this game. The villagers in the beginning could have so easily been throwaway characters, but they almost gave it a little extra oomph, even though they weren't there for long. It created stakes that I didn't realize were there until you were in the shit, because there were already stakes. It's like, oh shit, not only is shit hitting the fan for Ethan, but because of this incident, everything is going wrong for even all of these people. The enemies were really cool. I was super skeptical about like the lichens and stuff like that. I was like, vampires, werewolves, what the hell is going on? I really enjoyed how it came back to the mold. I honestly didn't see that coming when I came into Village. I had no idea it would have anything to do with the mold again. I thought that was just going to be a 7 thing. But that's now why I really like 7, because of this game, and it added on to that story. So in my opinion, my final thoughts on this game is like, number 1, absolutely pick it up and play it if you haven't. Even if you haven't played a Resident Evil game, I think it's just such a solid game itself. And I was absolutely blown away. And I'm so freaking happy that this game came out and was as good as it was.
For sure.
But yeah, unless y'all have any other final thoughts.
I guess my biggest final thought, which I've just been thinking about while we're talking, is this is a game that I have a mountain of nitpicks about it, but they don't come anywhere close to outweighing how good the game as a whole is. And the only reason I have all of these nitpicks is because I enjoyed the game and cared so much about it that I wanted some things to be better. Like I've played games that I was like people really crap on 5 all the time. I think 5 is a good serviceable game, but I don't really care about it. So when people are like, I wish this was better, I'm like, yeah, I can see that, but meh, I'm probably never going to play it again. this one, I have all these problems, and especially like Ethan's death at the end was such like a punch, because that's one of my big sins of writing, that like it hurt so much because everything else felt so good. Is I look forward to doing a third playthrough where I use the lightsaber only. Like that's what I think about this game, is that there's always going to be it, and how good it is isn't going to change, even though there are little things that bug me. So you should
Yep.
play it.
Yeah, I think same for me. Like the stuff, the complaints I have are honestly a lot of just like I want want more, and that's a good complaint to have. It was I went in not sure if I would like it, and ended up loving it, and I'm on board for the next one.
Indeed.
Well, hell yeah. Well, once again, y'all, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking Resident Evil. I hope we find an excuse to do this again in the future for some other
too.
game franchise. But yes, everybody, please go over to twitch.tv/goodgamingwithbadpeople. Check out Rob and CJ and Will, who is also, he's doing Subnautica now too, right?
Yes.
Throughout the week, variety streams. It's absolutely fantastic. And their Twitter is also up on the screen if you want to go follow them there.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you too again for joining me. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us. It's been a
Thank
blast.
you indeed.
All right. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you tonight.
Bye.
Bye.